In 2017, something happened in the gospel music world that nobody saw coming. David Phelps, the tenor whose voice had defined the Gaither Vocal Band's sound for years, walked away from it all at the peak of his career. Not because of a fight, not because of money, not because the music stopped moving him. He left for reasons that cut much deeper than any of that. Reasons that most people in the industry couldn't understand, and many fans refused to accept. But here's what makes this story worth your time. David's departure wasn't really about leaving a band at all. It was about a man who finally understood that the spotlight he'd spent decades chasing was slowly stealing everything that actually mattered. His decision sparked conversations that went far beyond gospel music, touching on questions that every one of us faces. When does success stop being worth its cost? What do you do when your calling evolves beyond what made you famous? And how do you walk away from something you love without destroying it? The answers David found changed everything. Not just for him, but for how we think about ambition, family, faith, and what it really means to live a life that matters. In 1997, a young tenor from Texas walked into the Gaither Vocal Band and changed everything. David Phelps had trained classically at Baylor University with a degree in voice performance, meaning he could have conquered Broadway, opera houses, or the pop charts. His vocal range spanned 3 octaves with effortless control. But David didn't want fame for fame's sake. He saw music as ministry, as a bridge between the human heart and the divine. When he joined Bill Gaither's legendary group, he brought something the Southern gospel world had never seen. He infused operatic power into traditional hymns, added Broadway drama to worship songs, and performed classics like Nessun Dorma with raw emotion that left audiences weeping. Songs like No More Night, End of the Beginning, and his rendition of Oh Holy Night became moments of transcendence for thousands of listeners. Throughout the late 90s and into the 2000s, David became the voice that defined a generation of gospel music. He was often the emotional centerpiece of performances, the one who could transform a simple lyric into a spiritual experience. Bill Gaither himself recognized something special in David. The group flourished, albums sold, tours packed venues, and David's star rose higher than he imagined. But the very success elevating his career was pulling him away from something he held more sacred than music. By 2005, after 8 years of relentless touring and living out of suitcases, David shocked fans by leaving the Gaither Vocal Band for the first time. The reason? His family needed him more than the stage did. Touring with the Gaither Vocal Band meant months on the road, crisscrossing the country and traveling internationally. There were rehearsals, sound checks, meet and greets, recording sessions, television tapings, and endless hotel rooms and tour buses. For David, married to Lori and raising 4 children, the cost was measured in missed moments. He missed first steps, first words, first days of school, birthday parties, soccer games, dance recitals, those ordinary Tuesday dinners where you're simply together. In one candid interview, David described looking at his children one day and realizing with a jolt that time wasn't slowing down. They were growing up, and he was watching it happen in snapshots between tours. He said, "I needed them, and they needed me." That statement carried the weight of hundreds of missed bedtime stories and thousands of miles traveled away from home. David stepped away in 2005, and during his time away, something unexpected happened. He didn't fade into obscurity. Instead, his voice and ministry flourished in new ways. He began developing his solo career with unprecedented freedom. He recorded albums that blended classical arrangements with contemporary Christian music, incorporating jazz influences and Broadway sensibilities, exploring themes more personal than traditional Southern gospel allowed. Albums like Life is a Church and Revelation showcased David Phelps unconfined by one genre or audience expectations. He was an artist embracing his creative potential, and audiences responded enthusiastically. But here's the twist. Despite finding solo success and having more family time and creative freedom, David returned to the Gaither Vocal Band in 2009. Why would someone who had successfully escaped return? Because the ministry, the message, and the brotherhood of the Gaither organization still called to him. Bill Gaither had become a mentor and friend. The other members were brothers in faith and music. The platform reached millions who might never attend his solo concerts. So he came back, but with clearer boundaries, better understanding of his family priorities, and an agreement to continue developing his solo work alongside group commitments. For 8 more years, from 2009 to 2017, David again became the soaring tenor voice audiences associated with the Gaither Vocal Band's signature sound. He recorded new albums, toured extensively, and continued creating those transcendent musical moments only he could deliver. But during this entire period, something was shifting inside him, a quiet transformation that would eventually lead to his final and most significant departure. By the mid-2010 seconds, David's solo work was evolving profoundly. He wasn't just creating different music stylistically. He was exploring spiritual territory that was deeper, more questioning, more intimate than traditional gospel typically allowed. His album, Freedom, became a watershed moment. Songs like Ghost Town, Water, and Heaven's Shore weren't standard worship anthems about victory and praise. They were honest explorations of doubt, identity, spiritual renewal, and the mysterious ways God works in the shadows of our lives. These songs sounded like journal entries set to music, vulnerably authentic, grappling with faith in a way that felt like conversation rather than declaration. David was writing about moments when God feels distant, about wilderness seasons when answers don't come easily, about the slow, painful, beautiful process of spiritual transformation that happens when we stop performing our faith and start living it. This wasn't music for the spotlight. This was music for the soul at 3 in the morning when sleep won't come and questions won't stop. Here's the critical insight many fans missed. David wasn't drifting from God or abandoning his faith. He was moving closer to the divine mystery than ever, but in a way that made some uncomfortable. The evangelical gospel world, particularly Southern gospel tradition, emphasized certainty, victory, triumph, and unwavering faith. David's newer music, while deeply Christian and worshipful, acknowledged the complexity of the spiritual journey. It made space for questions alongside answers, for struggles alongside victories, for the reality that sometimes we encounter God most powerfully not in grand worship moments, but in quiet, broken places. This theological and artistic shift couldn't easily coexist with the Gaither Vocal Band's ministry model, not because of conflict, but because David's artistic vision was expanding beyond what the group format could contain. He had stories to tell, melodies to explore, and spiritual insights to share that needed more space, more freedom, and more creative control than touring with a group could provide. By 2017, David faced another crossroads, but this time it was different from 2005. This wasn't just about family time, though that remained a priority. This wasn't just about his solo career, though that was part of it. This was about answering a calling too loud to ignore, a pull toward ministry that could only happen if he fully committed to his own unique path. His youngest children were entering their teenage years, crucial times when kids need their father present physically, emotionally, and spiritually. His marriage to Lori had weathered decades of absence, and he knew choosing his family again was essential. His creative spirit ached to break free from group dynamics, rigid tour schedules, and the expectations of being part of an established brand. And spiritually, he felt God leading him into a season of ministry that would be more intimate, more personal, and more aligned with the artistic and spiritual evolution he'd been undergoing. In 2017, David Phelps made his final departure from the Gaither Vocal Band, and how he did it speaks volumes about his character. There was no drama, no scandal, no bitter press releases or cryptic social media posts. David and Bill Gaither had an honest, gracious conversation about where David felt called to go. Bill gave David his full blessing. In public statements, Bill praised David as one of the most gifted vocalists in Christian music and made clear the door would always be open for collaborations, reunion performances, or even a return. This amicable parting, this mutual respect, is almost unheard of in the music industry, where departures often involve lawsuits, bitter accusations, and burned bridges. That David could leave at the height of his popularity and maintain such a positive relationship with Bill and the other members reveals something profound about everyone's character. Now, here's where we appreciate what David did, because in a culture that worships success, celebrity, and security, his decision was radically countercultural. Think about what he walked away from: guaranteed income from a successful touring group, the prestige of the Gaither name which opened doors everywhere in gospel music, the safety net of having an organization handle logistics while he just showed up and sang, the massive audience the Gaither platform provided, and the comfort of not having to prove his worth as a solo artist. Most artists spend entire careers trying to achieve the level of success David already had. And here he was, choosing to leave it behind. Why? Because he discovered that true success isn't measured by applause, album sales, or how many people know your name. True success is measured by alignment. Whether your life, your work, and your daily choices align with your deepest values and calling. Since leaving in 2017, David Phelps hasn't just survived. He's thrived in ways that validate every difficult choice. His solo career has reached new heights, with sold-out tours domestically and internationally. He's released multiple studio albums, live DVDs, and holiday specials, each showcasing the creative freedom he fought to achieve. Through his own production company and independent label, he maintains complete creative control, meaning every note, lyric, and arrangement reflects his authentic artistic vision. His musical explorations have become more adventurous, incorporating jazz-influenced arrangements, classical crossover work, Broadway-style storytelling, and original worship compositions that create space for genuine encounter with the divine. But here's what's most significant. He's built a devoted following that follows him not because of where he performs or who he's associated with, but because of who he is. These fans aren't just consumers. They're participants in his journey. People who resonate with his honesty, artistry, and willingness to be vulnerable about faith struggles and victories. The question inevitably arises: was leaving the safety of the Gaither empire worth it? While only David can definitively answer, all evidence suggests yes. He achieved fulfillment of living according to his values rather than others' expectations. He gained independence to create without boundaries. He secured family time that no amount of success could replace. And perhaps most importantly, he discovered a depth of ministry that goes beyond performance and reaches into genuine transformation. In interviews years after his departure, David has spoken with a peace that can't be faked. He talks about being present for his children's milestones, the joy of simple family dinners, the creative satisfaction of bringing his musical visions to life exactly as he imagines them, and the spiritual richness that comes from following God's whisper, even when it leads away from the spotlight. What makes David's story so compelling is that it challenges the narrative our culture constantly pushes. We're told that more is always better, that once you achieve success, you should leverage it for greater success, that turning down opportunities is foolish, that putting family before career is naive, and that leaving a guaranteed platform for an uncertain path is reckless. David's life stands as a living refutation of these assumptions. He demonstrates that sometimes the bravest thing is saying no to something good to make space for something better, even if that better thing looks smaller from the outside. He shows that real strength isn't enduring difficult circumstances indefinitely. It's having courage to change those circumstances when they no longer serve your highest calling. He proves that ministry doesn't require the biggest stage or largest audience. Sometimes the most powerful ministry happens in intimate venues where authentic connection is possible, in recorded music that meets people in private moments of need, and in the example of a life lived with integrity. There's a detail in David's story that I haven't mentioned yet, but that captures the essence of his character. Throughout all his years with the Gaither Vocal Band, through both his departure and return and final departure again, David never spoke negatively about the organization, Bill Gaither, or his fellow group members. He never played the victim, never blamed anyone, never suggested that he was held back or mistreated. Instead, he consistently expressed gratitude for the opportunities the Gaither platform provided, respect for Bill's leadership and vision, and affection for the brothers he sang alongside. This grace in how he handled transitions, this refusal to burn bridges or create drama, this ability to disagree about direction while maintaining relationship, reveals a spiritual maturity that is rare in any field, but especially in the entertainment industry. David understood something crucial. You can honor your past while moving toward your future. You can be grateful for a season while recognizing when that season has ended. And you can leave something behind without diminishing its value or attacking those who remain. At 55 years old in 2024, David Phelps shows no signs of slowing down. But more importantly, he shows no signs of regret. He continues to tour, connecting with audiences who come not for nostalgia, but for the present-moment artistry he brings to every performance. He continues to record, pushing the boundaries of what gospel music can sound like and exploring new sonic territories that reflect his ever-evolving artistic vision. He continues to push creative frontiers, collaborating with other artists, experimenting with different genres, and refusing to be boxed into any single category. Above all, he continues to be present for his family, supporting his children as they pursue their own dreams, nurturing his marriage, and demonstrating through his daily choices that the decision he made years ago to prioritize family wasn't just a one-time dramatic gesture, but a sustained commitment that shapes everything else. He also mentors up-and-coming artists, sharing not just technical vocal training, but the wisdom that comes from choosing calling over convenience, and he follows his spiritual path with the same courage that led him to leave the Gaither Vocal Band, always listening for God's next whisper, even if it leads somewhere unexpected. The legacy David Phelps is building isn't primarily about the impressive vocal performances, the awards, or the successful albums. Though all of those matter, his real legacy is the model he provides for what it means to live intentionally, authentically, and faithfully in a world that constantly pressures us to compromise those very things. For every artist who wonders whether they should take the safe route or risk the path that calls to their soul, David's story says, risk the calling. For every parent who struggles with work-life balance and wonders whether their career ambitions are costing them their family, David's story says, your kids need you more than your job does. For every person of faith who feels caught between the expectations of religious community and the whispers of God, leading them somewhere new, David's story says, follow the whisper, even when others don't understand. For everyone who has ever stood at a crossroads, wondering whether leaving something good makes them a quitter, or whether staying somewhere they've outgrown makes them a coward, David's story says sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is courageously step into the unknown. David Phelps left the Gaither Vocal Band, not because he was done with music, but because the mission and the music had converged in a new way that required a different platform. He left not because he was done with ministry, but because he was being called to a ministry that couldn't happen while he remained where he was. He left not because he stopped valuing what the Gaither organization represented, but because he realized his highest value was being expressed elsewhere. This wasn't a retreat, it was a realignment. This wasn't failure, it was faithfulness. This wasn't the end of something, it was the beginning of something he couldn't have discovered any other way. And for all of us watching his journey from the outside, whether we're fans of his music or simply students of how to live a meaningful life, his story poses uncomfortable but necessary questions. What are you holding on to because it's comfortable even though you've outgrown it? What calling are you ignoring because following it would cost you security, recognition, or the approval of others? What would your life look like if you had the courage to choose purpose over prestige, authenticity over applause, and alignment over achievement? The most powerful part of David's story isn't actually the leaving itself. It's what he found on the other side of that leaving. He discovered that his voice, which had always been extraordinary, became even more powerful when it was expressing his authentic self, rather than fitting into someone else's vision. He discovered that ministry isn't about how many people you reach, but about how deeply you reach them, and sometimes intimate connection has more transformative power than mass appeal. He discovered that his children didn't need a famous father. They needed a present father, and no achievement could compensate for his absence during their formative years. He discovered that his marriage thrived not when he was successful, but when he was available, not when he was recognized by thousands, but when he was attentive to the one. He discovered that creative fulfillment comes not from perfecting someone else's arrangements, but from bringing your own visions to life, even if the audience is smaller and the risk is greater. And he discovered that walking away from guaranteed success to pursue uncertain calling isn't reckless. It's the very definition of faith.